everyone, coming from the Napa Valley wine country, just outside the mystical Sonoma Mountains. This is Beyond the Strange. I'm your host, Dave Cruz. Thank you for joining us on this special spooktacular Halloween festival tonight. It is Sunday, October 28th, 2018. You can follow us on Twitter at Strange Days 2015, trending with the hashtag Beyonders for posts and comments for the show. Make sure to subscribe to Beyond the Strange on YouTube channel, and remember to set your alerts to receive new notifications and videos. And you can find the show on Facebook, Instagram, Google+, all that stuff under Beyond the Strange. We're on iTunes, Google Play, Spreaker, and Stitcher. And finally, keep checking back to Beyond the Strange for future updates, new merchandises and giveaways and prizes. We just gave away 2 t-shirts and a autograph novel from L.M. Labatt. We did that at the last show, so you definitely want to check for that. And the website will be getting a new facelift very soon, so keep checking for that. Anyways, I want to introduce my lovely guest tonight, Cleopatra. No. We have Varla Ventura with us. She is an author and researcher in her own right, and just a wonderful person to talk to, and a great friend. Thank you very much, Varla, for being here tonight.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Happy almost Halloween.
Happy almost Halloween. A little background on Varla. Varla Ventura is the author of Varla Ventura's Paranormal, Parlor, Ghosts, Seances, and Tales of True Hauntings. And she is the author of 5 other books: Banshees, Werewolves, Vampires, and Other Creatures of the Night, the Book of the Bizarre, Among the Mermaids, and Beyond Bizarre and Fairies, Pookas, and Changelings. And she can often be found looking about the deep, dark woods and lakes of Minnesota on the hunt for beastly things and hidden history. You can visit Varla online at www.varlaventura.net. And one more time, just give it up for Varla Ventura. Thanks again, Varla. You're in the box again.
That's how you this is how you clap in sign language.
So you definitely
Hey, I'll do a giveaway.
Check woods and lakes.
Yeah, I'll do a signed copy of my newest book.
Wow.
And you figure out what the rules are.
Okay, well,
the
last time we did that is we had someone send an email to the guest's email. So if you want to shout out your email,
wait a minute.
We could do it 2 ways. We could do it. The first person to send you an email.
Dear Varla, I totally hate you.
We could do that. We could do all kinds of different things. We can.
That's totally fine. No, I've given my email out before. I was completely teasing. But what do they do? Like, how do they win? I just pick them because I like their name. I feel like they need to tell us something about themselves, like something kind of scary, but not perverted scary.
Right. I'll tell you what, well, we'll talk about that more at the break.
Good plan.
Then we'll figure it out. But yeah, no, that's great. That'd be awesome. So we can have a random drawing today and that kind of thing. And later on, we can send it out. The lucky winner last time was at Crow. I just know their Twitter handle. So at Crow's very random numbers. That was pretty cool. Got in touch with him and we sent it out. So there you go. And,
awesome.
By the way, I want to let everybody know that Jerry Cthulhu is with us. He's hiding, or lurking, I should say, but he's producing the show for us tonight. And I just want to say thanks again. Shout out to Jerry Cthulhu. Thank you very much. And
yes, and like Cthulhu, he has many armed.
Many arms, many traits. Jerry's
very
awesome.
Talented.
Multi-tentacled.
Hey, you said you were going to stay here.
Whatever sticks.
No, but he is being me in the chat room. So just whatever I say, or that's Jerry, but it's probably what I would say too. So
You're giving away all your secrets.
I am. I know. I'm sorry. Anyways, that's true. But I want to welcome Sandra and Cassandra. Thank you very much for joining us. Oh, Melissa's here. Melissa, thank you for joining us. Drawing Out the Spirits podcast is here.
Hi.
And Share Kindness in England. Wow.
Ooh, now we feel really fancy.
Yeah,
International audience.
Cutter Calhoun. Good to see you. Russ Bailey from Black Sky Paranormal. Thank you for joining us. And I think I just wiped some of my makeup off my nose, but that's all right.
You're very dark. Again, stop giving your secrets away. No one can tell.
No one can tell. That's true. That's true. But anyways, Varla, how have you been since the last time we talked?
I've been great. I wanted to just say to you, you've had some killer guests, especially in the last month or so.
Thank you.
If people have not gone on and listened to your interview with Jim Harold, Jim Harold is kind of like the king of paranormal podcasting, and you got him to do a video interview, which is super cool. I love that guy. I fall asleep listening to his voice pretty frequently, and I mean that in the best way possible.
Yes.
Campfire stories are they're terrifying yet soothing somehow. So I love that podcast, and that was a great interview. It was really fun to kind of hear him be on the other side of the interviewer's chair. And I don't know if this is why, but shortly after that interview, he actually invited me to be part of his Halloween Facebook live hangout. So basically from 11:30 to midnight Eastern time on Halloween night, I'm just going to join the Facebook live somehow. I'm sure I'll get specific instructions, and just kind of get our freak on and maybe stuff our faces with some candy. I'm not sure, but I just wanted to say to you, Dave, there's been a bunch of really interesting guests. I've been listening to your show a lot, so
thank you.
Fun to be back, and thanks for having me. Since last we spoke, I definitely have the bones of a couple different manuscripts going. I tend to, probably like a lot of writers, I tend to do a lot of my writing in the fall and winter. Kind of makes sense. You're just in earlier, and it's a little colder and icier, especially here in Minnesota. So, just been kind of goofing off and getting ready for Halloween, and, writing scraps of ideas down. Hanging out with Mr. Bones, my good friend. Yeah. Mr. Bones was reading earlier, but he got, I don't think he got drunk or something, and he just dropped everything. So
just went right through him. I can understand that.
It's just not fully articulated,
Well, that's awesome. I know that you do stay busy, and you're way out there in Minnesota, but you were a Bay Area person at one time.
Yeah, pretty much born and raised in the Bay Area. So I've only lived out here I count it in winters. So this will be my third winter that I'm going into. So I once asked someone local, how many Minnesota winters do you have to survive to be considered a local? And she said one. You just gotta make it through one. Once you make it through one, the rest are
pretty tough, huh?
Yeah. It's like, well, it's just it's cold. Yeah, it's cold. But like I said, it's nice because it actually gives me this excuse to be inside and work on a lot of stuff that I'm not sure what I'm going to do with this next manuscript, if I'm going to actually try and write it all out, or if I'm going to pitch it to my publisher, or quite what I'm going to do. But it needs to be written regardless of whether or not it actually gets published. There's the only way to go.
I'm sure. Well, the last book that we talked about was the Paranormal Parlor. For those of you who you guys, I'm telling you, Varla's books, the cover art on these books are so wonderful. I have the Banshees in back of me, but I don't know if you have it on you or not. But if you could show some of these people,
I mean, it's a hirsute maiden. How can you go wrong, right?
It's just like the cutest werewolf. I mean, serious.
And then this is the fairy one, which is lovely. But one of the best things about the fairy one is the little fairy on the spine. It's just so cute.
Grab the salt. No, I'm just kidding.
And well, these are the sort of the originals, right? The Book of the Bizarre. They have, you can see the reflective foil stamping on there. And then they have all kinds of cool, like little bit of weird spot art. Of course, not getting any here as I'm going through, but there's always some kind of strange illustrations inside, which is also true with the current one. So makes a great stocking stuffer. Not that we're ready to talk about that, but I'm just saying it does actually fit right in there.
Interestingly enough, I never really tied Christmas and Halloween together, but I would say they do kind of have similar traits, and
oh yeah,
they're each based around different pagan holidays. I mean, we want to talk a little bit about Halloween history and some of their meaning, and I believe Halloween is not only there's a couple I've heard. There's Sam Hain, or is it Sam Hain? I believe
that's how you say the metal band. You say Sam Hain if you're saying the metal band. I mean, that's how I've heard the metal band, but I think the Celtic pronunciation is Samhain. That's another way to say it.
Okay.
And then you can kind of hear when you say that, you can kind of hear a little bit of that Halloween kind of coming in there. But right. You're right. Both holidays stolen from the witches. Totally. Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely. And we also have All Saints Day, which is close to All Hallows Day. I believe that's close to Halloween.
Hallows Eve. Yeah.
Hallows
you
Eve.
Have All Saints Day and All Souls Day. And All Saints Day is November 1st and All Souls Day is November 2nd. Well, as you know, Dia de los Muertos takes place over the 1st and the 2nd. And the 1st is sort of for Day of the Dead. It's for children and lost souls. And then the 2nd is the sort of like proper holiday where it's all encompassing and most of the parades take place on that day. And that kind of coincide. I mean, we've talked, I think, a little bit about how it's not a coincidence that these holidays overlap with these sort of pagan rituals. And it was actually probably a very smart tactic by the Catholic Church to sort of integrate what was locally celebrated with what their doctrine dictated. And so you have, something like Halloween, which is totally a traditional pagan holiday. It's all about bonfires and sort of purging the evil spirits and welcoming the new year. And, it's a pretty, like, if you were to, people would wear masks and dress and sort of, party around this big bonfire. Now imagine that you're some new priest in town and you've sort of taken up residence and you're trying to like convert everybody and you see these bonfires all over the hills and you're just like, these crazy pagan freaks. We got to get them in the church to repent their sins. We're going to do it tomorrow and we're going to do it really early so they don't stay up the night before because we'll tax them if they do. So, I mean, there's definitely some strategy in there. It's like risk, right? It's like you got to think it out. But and likewise with Christmas and the solstice, and a lot of indigenous populations have incredible rituals around that time, including fire and sort of burning away the darkness of winter. And in addition, you have both holidays associated with high magic. So you have something like Halloween with the very, very thin veil between this world and the world of the dead. And especially with a lot of, like Celtic mythology and the association with fairies and otherworldly beings, there wasn't necessarily like a world where there were ghosts and a world where there were people and a world where there were fairies. It was like all of those worlds. There was, the world we can see and the world that we can't see. And so there are times of year when, you can do high magic, because the veil between these worlds is thinner, and so spirits and things can pass more easily, and you can get messages through. You also have to be really careful because things can pass through. And that the same thing applies to sort of around Christmas time, the 12 days of Christmas, the winter solstice. Again, a very important time, because so gradually the days are getting lighter again. And so it was a time for important rituals. And it was also a time to sort of get through that winter and, burn the light brightly to ward off the darkness and welcome the lightness to come. And there are many, many freaky little stories about Christmas time, with little things that are afoot and witches out riding trolls, and why you shouldn't walk down the path. You should stay home on Christmas Eve because you do not know what is going to snatch you from the woods. And so we have that also with Halloween. We revel in it a lot more. At Christmas time, we just think more of like, we kind of get a little bit gnomey, a little bit trolly with Santa and stuff like that, but we don't get quite into the like totally terrifying creatures. That Christmas can be very frightening as well.
Well, they did used to, from the songs, they would talk about ghost stories and tales of creatures. And yesterday I was recording with Melissa Martell and her podcast, and I was talking about El Cucuy and another urban legend from Mexico and the Latin community, which is called La Lechuza, which is the owl lady, or the owl witch. And we could talk about that later. But what came up for me was how often it's interesting how parents would tell their children, if you don't behave, the boogeyman's going to get you. And El Cucuy is related to the boogeyman, but around Christmas time, it's Krampus, who's the one that will beat you over the head and put you in the sack. So he's not leaving anything. He's taking.
He'll kidnap you, and whip you. I mean, some people pay good money for that. But that's true. And there are also, if you think about like the ghosts of, something like Charles Dickens and his classic ghost stories, he had a lot of ghost stories that took place around the Christmas holidays. And there's actually a lot of folklore related to that, saying that, wells would run with blood on Christmas Eve, and that animals could talk and you'd be able to hear them. And there are all these things that would torture you if you were to go out and about and wander the Highland roads late at night on Christmas Eve, or anytime during the 12 days of Christmas. It was also thought to be a time to, especially during the spiritualist movement, in the 1840s through like the 1920s or 30s, that was a time, that was another like peak time for seances and things like that. But certainly around Halloween, I think you have some of the more obvious connotations of it being, we're basically going into dark season. We're entering the darkness. And that's a time for reflection. That's a time for naturally remembering people who have died that you might miss. I think that happens also around the holidays. We try and like put a bunch of lights on it, but it can be a very difficult time for people because they see who's not there and who's missing. And so we don't acknowledge that. We want like our happy little elves dancing along, and we don't always acknowledge the importance of, that sort of the ritual of just even burning a candle for someone that has died. And now, at Halloween time, we get a little more into that, and we invoke the skulls, and we invoke witches and devils. And it was thought once that this was the night that they roamed freely, and that you dressed up so that you could pass among them without them following you home. It was like, oh yeah, I'm good. I'm just a witch too. Yeah, I'm just gonna go to my little cottage up the lane. Nobody look. And it was just another way to sort of ward off the evil. Also the witch's new year. So in many pagan traditions, certainly in my belief, it's the witch's new year. Halloween is the witches' New Year. Some witches will argue that it's Beltane. Fine, you can have it. You can have your, that's an important holiday. It's the spring renewal. But in my mind, the witches' New Year begins on Halloween. And that is a time when you kind of purge, freak out, feast, party, eat apples, make out, and then repent the next day.
That's what happened. That's exactly what happens.
That's what you should do.
That's right. And that's interesting. What you brought up earlier, Varla, was that this happens around the winter solstice between Halloween and Christmas. And I've been noticing, and I'm sure a lot of people know more about than I do, when it comes to esoteric and magic and all these pagan traditions, are the solstices. I haven't really had a whole lot of time to research them, but I've noticed that a lot of holidays happen either on the solstice or around the solstice. Is that, have you?
Yeah, or the equinoxes, like
right.
Yep, you can look at
the seasons, I guess, if you will.
Yeah, the changing of the seasons, the time of the year. You have and then through all over the world, you have, of course, in the southern hemisphere and the northern hemisphere, there are different times of year that these things take place because different hemispheres, so different relationship with the light and the way the light is changing. Not a science major, so I'm not going to get too into that, but I think you all know what I mean there. Yeah.
Right.
The lining up. But you do have that overlap where you'll have, a lot of different cultures that will have a holiday around that time. And often around between October and December, you have all of these different kind of traditions, and most of them involve candles and remembrance. But you also have other times of year where there might be a time that is basically a sort of celebration of the dead. But you do have a lot of that kind of overlap, and this being the darkest time of year, a lot of those rituals do involve the bonfires and the idea that we are transitioning into winter. Also, some people think that Halloween is a celebration of harvest, and it's a little late actually to celebrate harvest. Like, a lot of the harvest was celebrated in like August and September, but you would really go into like this time of year was kind of like you've already scraped the ground for all the turnips you can muster, and this is like a time to bring on luck for the new year. And I was reading a couple things recently in an Irish newspaper about some of the traditional things that we do today that are originally, Irish Halloween traditions.
Right.
And among those things, of course, is the bonfire, but probably the most talked about is the jack-o'-lantern.
Yes. I was going to touch on that. Well, I was actually going to ask you about that, if we could touch on that a little bit, because wasn't it to ward off spirits?
So here's the thing. There weren't pumpkins in Ireland. There were other root vegetables, including turnips, and turnips were in abundance. And yes, if you have, honestly, just Google Irish turnip jack-o'-lantern and you will see some pretty freaky images. Way scarier than a cute roundy pumpkin. Pumpkins are indigenous to the Americas, to the North and parts of Central America. So that's where they, when the Irish immigrated into the United States, this tradition, they began to use pumpkins instead. But there are several ideas about why we have jack-o'-lanterns. And one of them is that you would make these lanterns and you would put them in your windowsill around this time of year to ward off evil spirits. Other ideas are that this was a sort of more modern one, and this is where the idea of Jack comes into play, is that Jack was actually this mortal guy who got in cahoots with the devil. And in one version, he gets trapped in a tree and he has glowing eyes. And the only way to keep him from coming into your house along with the devil is to put a light in your window so that it looks as if you're home, or it looks as if he's already there. So they pass you by. And then in another version, it's basically just like an effigy of him. But what I was reading recently, which was something that really intrigued me, is that, and this to me makes a lot of sense, not to like discount like the devil and Jack, because those, we all know the devil resides in Jack. We've all been there, especially on Halloween night.
Don't touch it, but yeah.
Oh, and there's a reason. There are evil spirits trapped in that bottle, waiting to come out, waiting to fight.
They come out one way or the other.
Yeah, they're gonna come out. May not be the way you expect. But the idea was that you burn a fire. At that time of year, you're sort of having this big bonfire. It's a big celebration. You know, the community's all involved, and you're playing games, and you're just making merry and singing songs and dancing. And it was thought to be, this fire was good luck. And then what you would do is, at home, you would snuff out the fire in your hearth. Even if it was a cold night, you would snuff out the fire in your hearth, and you would sweep your hearth, and you would totally clean your house. And then you would bring back a cinder or a coal from the fire, the bonfire, the Halloween bonfire, the New Year fire. And by bringing back a piece of that fire and starting the first fire of the new year from that, you were bringing good luck to your house. Well, how are you going to get a coal across the field? It wasn't like you just had the bonfire in your front yard. You know, it's just like, how you get this coal, this burning flame or piece of wood all the way from the bonfire to your hearth. You got to put it in something. Guess what? There's lots of turnips. We're going to just scoop out this little thing and basically make a votive out of this turnip and use that to bring it back to your home. And then you're able to start this new year. So I think it's probably a mesh of all of those things, that this was thought to be good luck. And since it was good luck, eventually it started being used as a way to ward off evil spirits, which is another way of bringing good luck. And those creepy little faces were a way of deflecting those spirits. Just as we mentioned earlier, you might dress as a witch or a goblin or a werewolf or something to pass among the spirits safely.
Now that's new to me. Yeah. That's really cool that you brought that up, because that's the first time I've heard that.
Really? Yeah. So that's why, if you think even in some of those really early Halloween like postcards and stuff from the Victorian era, when Halloween was taking foot in the United States, you had usually see a kid at like, one's dressed like one's dressed like a witch, and one's dressed like a devil, and one's dressed like maybe some kind of goblin or other spirit or a ghost. And so because the veil is so thin this time of year and it's this magical night, if they're out there wandering around, you could pass among them safely without worrying that they were following you home, and without becoming possessed yourself. And that was not necessarily like trick-or-treating and dressed as these things. That sort of caught on a little bit more recently, but that also has its origins in Ireland, because you would have this big fire and the children would go from house to house and they would ask for either fuel for the fire or money to put toward the party fund, or food for the party fund. And, you know, it wasn't really considered begging so much as like, this was something that you did. You went to all the wealthy houses and they gave out this thing, and it was considered also good luck for someone wealthy to be giving in that fashion, because this was a good luck celebration. And so you have trick-or-treating, you have the like spirits. And so that sort of meshed together, mostly in the United States, as a way to like dress like these little goblins and ghoulies and go door to door. You know, now we just get candy, which is,
I like that.
Totally awesome. Yeah, we're not complaining about that. I mean, some people say, oh, there's so much Halloween candy. You are not my friend. Like, what are you talking about? So much Halloween. Too much candy. Oh, my life's so horrible. Too much candy. I have no sympathy.
I welcome it. I'll take all the candy. How about that?
You must bring it to your dentist and get $1 a pound, or whatever you feel like you need to do. Spoil sport.
Well, I think that's a real school lesson there for a lot of that history. That's wonderful, Varla. That's really
It's so
awesome.
cool. I know, and like the thing about the bonfire and the coal, I had heard something kind of along those lines where,
Mhm.
like it was used to help farmers get back to the home at this time of year when they were still working, but it was getting dark so early. But I had never really thought about, oh yeah, transporting the coal. I thought that was really kind of an interesting tidbit that I learned this year. So
I think that's
passing it on
awesome.
to all of you.
So, in some of the books that you've written so far, Varla, have you do get true stories and true tales about different experiences from people. Anything
Yes.
from Halloween around this time of
Oh,
year?
oh, that's a good question. Actually, I was just gonna say, since I started writing, that actually has always been a big part of, not necessarily in length, but it's been part of what I've always wanted to include. Even with the books of the bizarre, I have several ghost stories, sort of this chapter of collected ghost stories, and many of those are stories that they were friends of mine that had told me these stories over the years, and I
Mhm.
I am putting this in the book, including stories of my own. In the
We've got
most recent book, I've got a lot more stories. I kind of always took that back seat for a
mhm.
lot of it, but in this last book, I mean, they just they unleashed, and all of my ghosts ended up in, well, not all of them, but most of my ghosts ended up in that book.
We've got some time before our break. So, are there any stories that you can think of off the top of your head, or that you would like to share?
Oh yeah. Well, one of the I can tell you a couple stories that were like my favorite stories that in the most recent book, I have a story from a dear friend of mine named Alex, and
Mhm.
she has contributed stories to me and just told me stories over the years. In this one, she talks about living in Santa Fe and being haunted by the spirit of a little boy. And that was one of the first stories when I first met her 20 something years ago. She told me that story while we were, smoking cigarettes on a break as waitresses. Um, I'm like, oh, yeah, I got this crazy story. But the first story of hers that I included was a story that took place more recently, but I find it to be quite terrifying.
Mm.
Um, Not like, "Oh my god, I would never go in that place," but very intense. So she was, if you can imagine, she it, by trade is like a professional organizer and cleaner, and she's always hired to, like, if somebody's moving, they hire her and they want her to come in and like clean and paint and organize and just sort of make sure everything goes well. And she was living in Portland, Oregon at the time, and she went downstairs. She was cleaning a basement alone with her
Oh no!
headphones in, listening to music, because cleaning can be boring. So you're just like rocking out, listening to music. And
I think of
she's
Friday the 13th already.
yeah, right. So she's right. I mean, she's in a basement. She's alone because this house has been. Um, I think it was just purchased. I'd have to check the story really quick, but either it was just purchased or it was just sold. But either
Mhm.
way, she was hired. No one was living in the house yet, and no one was home at the time.
Uh-huh.
So she's downstairs in the all the way basement, and basements in Portland all have those like egress windows. So it's just sort of like a bit of light coming in, but it's not a full window, or it's a half window. And they're pretty low below the ground. And so she's down there, and there's a bunch of windows in this basement. It's kind of like one that's kind of, into the hillside. And she's cleaning, and she's a couple of times she's felt like a tap or something pulling her hair. And she's like, okay, just thinking her hair is snagged on something or it's a cobweb. I mean, she's cleaning, she's doing her thing.
Uh-huh.
So she's going along, and then she feels it again. And this time she's sort of in front of this bank of windows, and the windows are reflective because the lights are on inside. It's dark outside because it's, of course, dark, and she's in a basement alone because that's how good ghost stories go. And she feels that tug again. And this time she looks up and she can actually see a piece of her hair straight straight up, not caught on anything up here, but just straight up. And that's when she realizes that there's something in the basement with her. It's been trying to get her attention.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
pulling on her hair, and she basically, hightails it out of there, gets upstairs. There's nobody home. So what's she gonna do? So she just, kind of cleans up her things for the night and leaves. And then, she told the homeowners later. Now, she didn't have any additional experiences that I recall in that house, but the homeowners told her that there was a weird spiral staircase that was in the house. And that
Mhm.
staircase used to be in an old county jail where they used to hang people. So she was like totally freaked out when she heard that because, some people don't believe that objects or things can hold a ghost or a spirit or an energy, and it could have just easily been something that was in the house.
Right.
But it scared her enough, and I think what's significant about the story is, I mean, I felt things pressed down on the bed, and I felt taps on my shoulder, and I've been whacked in the forehead before. But this was the visual. If one of those times when something was pressing down on the bed, if I happened to have been looking and I had seen that depress, I think that would have taken it to another level.
Oh,
For me,
yeah.
I was kind of laying there and I felt it, and then I sat up and I couldn't see anything. For her to actually see that hair standing up on end, that was kind of next level. So
Oh
that's
my
a good
god.
little true ghost story. And that was one of the ones that sort of launched the Book of the Bizarre. Actually, it's one of the
Mhm.
first stories
Oh,
in that book.
okay.
Yeah.
That is such a cool story. I mean, very scary, very spooky, especially for her. I mean, I wouldn't want to
She's
feel
very
anything.
brave. I mean,
Yeah, I'd have to see. I mean, being in a basement by herself, I
with
mean,
your headphones in,
man, that
I'd be
yeah.
more worried about the living.
Oh yeah, no kidding, no kidding, for real. But yeah, I it's very interesting that that started your books series. And I'm getting a message from Jerry Cthulhu. Thank you, Jerry. I got that. I'll take care of that after the break.
Wait, I just want to say that actually that happened to me last time. Do you remember that? I started the interview and it was still light out here, so I
Mhm.
hadn't figured out the lighting in the room. And like, I don't know, 45 minutes into it, I'm in like pitch darkness. And I think I finally was just like, Dave, I gotta grab a candle or something. It looks like I'm trying to hide out here, but I got very dark. Although I think it kind of works with the
It does.
eerie glow of your face and
Thank
the,
you.
kind of, spooky ghoul thing you have going on.
That is it's the ghoul look. But no, this is the reason why people have full time producers. Unfortunately, I don't have them full time, but tonight I do, and I want to say thank you to my producer Jerry Cthulhu, and yeah, we'll take care of that. Get some more lighting in here, but no, that's a great story. Do you have another one that you want to share, real quick?
Yeah. So I think like that was one of the ones that sort of started out the Book of the Bazaar because originally the Book of the Bazaar, I wanted the Book of the Bazaar to be more like what this book is, the Paranormal Parlor.
Uh-huh.
I
Okay.
originally wanted a collection of ghost stories because I was totally that kid in the basement reading like Ripley's Believe It or Not and
Hmm.
all of the kind of like ghost stories and the all of those collections and Tales from the Crypt and all that stuff. And so that was the kind of book that I sort of initially set out to write. And then the publisher was like, yeah, let's work on this idea a little bit. Um, and I think it worked out really well because the Book of the Bazaar is a collection of freaky facts, and it's all kinds of tidbits and weird things that I always used to share at parties and stuff.
Hmm.
So, but I have several ghost stories in there, and another one that is actually a pretty freaky one is about the haunted boathouse, and this took place not terribly far from where you live, Dave. This is
Oh.
on the coast near Point Reyes.
Oh
So
yes, I know where Point Raises. I've
basically
been there lots
due
of times.
due west of you.
Hmm.
And this is a friend of mine. His stories have been in my books many times. Last time we talked about a story of his where he had that weird sort of like Bigfooty banshee groaning creature in the woods that shook the cabin that he lived in. Same friend. He's an archaeologist by trade, and he was at a boathouse on the in Point Reyes National Seashore, and they were working on they were excavating a site, and they stayed in this boathouse. which isn't something that I think you can access as an average person. But when you're working on an archaeological dig in a national park, I guess they put you up there.
Mhm.
And he said that he was of the crew, he was the least, I don't want to say the least cynical. He was the most open to something paranormal, just because in his life he had, often seen shadow people and scribble monsters and all kinds of weird things had followed him around throughout his life. And like me, and one of the reasons that we're friends is that we both had these mothers that sort of exposed us to a lot of esoterica, possibly at an inappropriately young age, but also other cultures. And so we both kind of had that in common, that we were, reading these books about tarot and things of that nature, at a very young age. And so it became kind of second nature to us. Neither, I was not dragged to church. I was, given strange psychic tests at a young age. So my sister will still complain about that. But in any case, this boathouse, the story is that there was a boat launched from this boathouse when it was first built, and the year has escaped me, but I want to say it was like the 30s or the 40s.
Okay.
And I can probably look it up actually as I tell you the story, because I know right where it is. It's one of my favorite stories. Anyway, this boat went out to answer a distress call, and it went all the way up to, I want to say like Point Arena or something pretty far away from, here we have the haunted boathouse. Mm-hmm. Okay, so he was in the Drake's Bay Bluff along the Point Reyes National Seashore in Northern California. And it was the restored Drake's Bay life-saving station. You can interrupt me if we're supposed to go to break.
It's cool. You know what? As a matter of fact, let's go ahead. Yeah, let's go ahead and stop here.
If you want to know what happened, you're gonna have to stay tuned.
You're gonna have to stay tuned and
Sounds
stick
good.
around, and we'll also talk about winning one of your writings. That's for a free giveaway. So we're gonna take some time out for a break, if you will, Mr. Jerry, and stop right here. This is Beyond the Strange. I am your host, Dave Cruz, along with Jerry Cthulhu, and we are speaking with Varla Ventura. So everyone, please don't go away. We'll be right back right after this.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
I warn you, this could scare you, as the sound bothers me to listen to. It has always haunted me. What you're about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
I've seen the Martians feed.
What in heaven's name is it?
I don't know. Beyond the Strange.
Have you ever looked skyward and pondered UFOs, aliens, time travel, alternate universes, and parallel dimensions? Want to explore paranormal activities, ghost hauntings, various cryptoids, such as Bigfoot, sea and lake monsters? Greetings, Beyonders. I'm author Casper Parks, and you are listening to Beyond the Strange with host Dave Cruz. Help spread the word by posting links in forums and social media. Available at Speaker.com, YouTube, and Google Hangouts.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
I warn you, this could scare you, as the sound bothers me to listen to. It has always haunted me. What you're about to hear is very disturbing indeed.
I've seen the Martians feed.
What in heaven's name is it?
I don't know. Beyond the strange.
Have you ever looked skyward and pondered UFOs, aliens, time travel, alternate universes, and parallel dimensions? Want to explore paranormal activities, ghost hauntings, various cryptoids, such as Bigfoot, sea and lake monsters? Greetings, Beyonders. I'm author Casper Parks, and you are listening to Beyond the Strange with host Dave Cruz. Help spread the word by posting links in forums and social media. Available at Speaker.com, YouTube, and Google Hangouts.
Hey, this is Deb, and you're listening to Dave Cruz on Beyond the Strange Radio.
I warn you, this could scare you, as the sound bothers me to listen.
I think we're back. We are back. And anyways, that didn't work out very well. But we are back. This is Beyond the Strange. This is our Halloween Spooktacular special with Varla Ventura. And Varla Ventura is an author, writer, researcher, cool person all around. And she's a very, very good friend. And I just want to thank her for coming back on the show and returning with everyone. Okay, I'm gonna take this off. I can't.
Yeah.
I
Oh,
don't
you're
even
gonna
know if
sweat
anyone
like crazy. That's gonna be
I thought the makeup was bad. That was barely breathing that thing. But anyways, um, but thank you everyone for being here tonight and joining us in this wonderful festival of Halloween. And this is one of my favorite times of the year, Varla. I don't know about you, but I like it even more than Christmas. And maybe it's
of course.
Maybe it's because it leads into all of the other holidays for me, and the time of the year. It's you get kind of tired of the heat of the summer, and I don't know.
Oh yeah.
For me, I just I love this time of year, and it gets darker soon, and it's just a wonderful time for me. But anyways, we were talking about the story before we went to break, about the point raise.
Oh yeah, the 100. I remember that we were talking about that. Really, I do. Time lapse.
And I want to remind everyone out there also that you can visit Varla's website, varlaventura.net. She's also on Facebook. You do have a Twitter or any other social media?
I mean, I have them.
You have them.
I don't really. I mean, every once in a while I go on Twitter, but I have difficulty with brevity. Oh
yeah, my wolf. I forgot about that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. But
no, that's lovely.
I'll get another one and send it to you.
This is pretty cool.
Oh, and by the way, if we want to, okay, if you, I know it's okay. If we want to, I figured out if you are the first, if you're the first person to email me, we could do that.
Okay. No, I don't care if it's my email. I just feel like,
okay,
I don't know, a little higher stakes here. Like, what can we, what can we get them to confess? I don't know. What do you normally do with your giveaways?
It's random. So the first, I was just gonna say the first person to either email me or you, that after we come back from the break, which is right now, will win.
Oh yeah, like now while you're listening live. Okay, yeah.
Right. Yeah.
How about you? Because I cannot look at my email right now.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay.
No worries. If you want me to say your name over the broadcast, just email me, dave@beyondthestrange.com, and I'm sure Varla will be happy to.
I will send you. You'll have to provide a mailing address.
Yes. Make sure you
stalk you, and it will be first person starting now.
Now, email Dave to say, "Hey, Dave, tell us
your
watching
email, Dave."
Story. Yeah, dave@beyondthestrange.com. And yes, just let us know that you're watching the broadcast right now of Varla Ventura and us. And you
can win a signed copy of Varla Ventura's Paranormal Parlor.
There you go. So do that right now as we speak, and go. No, just kidding.
Okay, and go.
Back to your story, Varla.
The haunted boathouse. Now I have to look it up again. Okay. So the boathouse, as we have established, is in Drake's Bay and Point Reyes National Seashore. Mm-hmm. And the boathouse was originally a life-saving station, and it is now still a National Historic Landmark. The boathouse, a National Historic Landmark, is an impressive building overlooking the waters of Drake's Bay. As the park official led us on our initial tour of the building, I could not help but notice a creeping feeling that seemed to hang around. These sensations increased when we were brought into the boat room. The boat room houses a now decommissioned lifeboat, the first motorized lifeboat north of San Francisco Bay. The lifeboat had been used in countless rescue missions from 1953 to 1965, covering the extent of the Northern California coastline from Drake's Bay north to Humboldt Bay. Now, think that's a really long and rugged stretch of the California coast.
Very much.
And so from the 30s through the 60s, that is a treacherous stretch. On a stormy Thanksgiving Eve, no
worries. Caught button. Good.
On a stormy Thanksgiving Eve in 1960, the Coast Guard team at Drake's Bay was alerted to a cry for help from a fishing boat that appeared to be in distress north of Fort Bragg. A well-trained and competent crew, they quickly responded. A 2-person crew launched the lifeboat into the dark night, no easy task, and headed north to Fort Bragg through blinding rain and turbulent seas. The experienced seamen made their way up the rocky and treacherous coast and successfully towed the fishing boat to shore just outside of Fort Bragg. They then reportedly headed south back to Drake's Bay. The crew members never returned to the boathouse. The following morning, a search party headed to the boathouse only to discover a horrific sight. The lifeboat had run aground not more than 150 yards from its berth at the boathouse. The engine and propeller were still churning. Yet neither member of the crew was in sight. Although the lifeboat had traveled hundreds of miles in the most adverse of conditions and had returned to the very bay from whence it had launched, there were no signs of the crew. Their bodies were never found, which isn't unusual on that Northern California coast.
Right.
Shortly thereafter, the boathouse was decommissioned and the lifeboat locked away. For 20 years, the lifeboat sat in its home until the National Park Service created the Point Reyes National Seashore, and the historic boathouse and lifeboat therein became part of the lengthy restoration process. The Park Service restored the lifeboat to its former glory, intending to take it back out of the bay for special occasions. At last the day came for the boat to be launched again into the salty waters. Reporters and park supporters gathered round to view the lifeboat, which was supported on a carriage of 2 wooden sawhorses. Just at the moment of rechristening, the lifeboat lurched forward and crashed down, smashing one of the sawhorses and damaging the keel of the boat extensively. The boat would not again touch the waters of Drake's Bay, and it remains exactly where it fell, half on and half off the ground. For 4 nights in late October, and this was 2004 when this took place, so about 14 years ago. For 4 nights in late October, after long days of archaeological work, our 5-person crew returned to the boathouse for a night's sleep. Yet these nights were anything but restful. Each member of our crew reported strange happenings and unexplained sounds. Mysterious footsteps creaked down the corridor outside the captain's room when all members of our team were accounted for. Things slammed to the floor in the boathouse room, things that had been fastened tightly to the wall the night before. One of our crew members reportedly said there was somebody looking through the shelves in the kitchen where she saw shadows. The sight was enough to scare her from her luxurious room downstairs and the bunks upstairs where the rest of us lodged. So I remember when he was telling me the story, there was 1 woman on the crew and the other 4 were men. And so she got her own room, which was just off the kitchen. And she got so freaked out that she just went and slept upstairs in one of the bunks. A lunar eclipse, the shortened days and long nights of late October, a brewing storm, a boathouse that rests 3/4 of the way over the murky waters of the bay. Even a team of rational scientists could not help but feel that there was something decidedly haunted about the boathouse.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
And I just want to say, this is my friend. His name is Chris Ward, and he has a book out. He would be a wonderful guest on your show. Just to make a little plug for him. His name is Christopher Aaron Ward, and he actually wrote a book called The Cemeteries of the Western Sierra. And he's actually become quite the cemetery expert in his years of just, archaeological work, but also, like myself, being very interested in cemeteries and history. And he lives in Nevada County, which isn't that far from you, and where I grew up and how I know him. But he has a wonderful book, and I'll tell you about his more of his contact info off air. But if anybody wants, his book's a wonderful collection of photographs, but also he's got a few very intriguing stories in there that are a little bit more on the maybe ghostly spectrum. And it's an Arcadia press, so it's one of those ones with all the beautiful photos. So that's my plug
yes.
for you, Chris. If you're listening, I'm plugging your book because it's awesome.
Yeah, I'd love to have him on the show sometime.
Yeah, I will totally put you in contact with him. He's a really interesting person. He has lots of great stories and knows a lot about cemetery history and both California and just in general. So anyway, that is the haunted boathouse story. And one of the reasons that story always kind of stuck in my head when he first told me, if you've never been to Point Reyes National Seashore, it's very isolated.
Yes, it is.
The cliffs are constantly eroding. That whole stretch of Northern California coast is like, that's where you always hear about somebody's, nabbed by a sneaker wave, or they're abalone fishing and or abalone diving and something goes awry. So the fact that there was this rescue mission happening and that the rescue mission was successful, and yet the crew, they got all the way back to the bay, but they were not that far from the lighthouse or from the boathouse. So I think, to my knowledge, it's not been investigated like by a professional investigation team, but we should add that to our list of freaky places that we want to record overnight, because this was like everybody had these experiences and they had been there individually. They had the experiences and didn't talk about them really until like the next day. And as I said, he was the least skeptical of his group, and everybody was pretty convinced something was very ominous about that place.
It does seem like it. I love what you just touched on, the fact that more people are doing investigations, a lot more than when I was growing up. And I'm finding that a lot more, to be the case. I think it's great. And I've only gone on one investigation myself. Well, it was me and my wife, and then later on, the same place, I went with a friend of mine, Nancy, who's a medium, and uncovered a lot of information there. But
that's the Lawler house, right? That's the story. That story is in here. I'm gonna hold it up so everybody can see that.
I really don't want to talk about it.
We don't have to talk about it, but I just want to show that Dave's story is in here.
I have mentioned it quite a few times on the show, and
all right.
Oh, look at that.
I won't talk about it then. Okay.
So we have a winner.
Oh, great. Who's our winner?
Our winner is Cassandra 50.
Yay!
And she is in the YouTube chat right now. And I just want to congratulate you. And
that's great. Congratulations. Cassandra, why don't you have Cassandra, if you want to just email me, varlaventura@gmail.com, and we can privately correspond about the address to send it to you and how you would like the book addressed, and I will sign it and send it to you, and I will get it out in the mail this week. That's exciting.
That is very awesome. And right now, I'm looking at my phone right now to send the text message in the YouTube chat that Cassandra has won. Oh, there she knows.
Yay! Because she's listening. Yeah. Woo! That's great.
You are the winners. Awesome. See, everybody, anyone listening on the podcast, you have to be here live. You have to be here live to win some of these prizes that our wonderful guests have been so graciously said that they would send out to the audience. So there you go. A signed, autographed book from Varla Ventura herself, and they're wonderful books. They are awesome. So much great information, and I just love the way they read. They're just great. So congratulations, Cassandra. Just wanted
to say, congratulations.
Go ahead and contact. You can contact me too again if you like, or you can.
Yeah, we can exchange the info. Yeah, however you'd like.
So, but yeah, getting back to that story, it's in your book, and I think that's awesome. Thank you very much, Varla, for including me in your book about the Lawler house. I still have yet to go back there.
Oh, really?
And follow up. I mean, I see it every once in a while. I'll go by there and check it out. But it's not that I'm scared of it or anything. I just, I just don't have the time to do anything.
Right. It's like hang out in there. And I imagine it has like limited hours, right? Because it's like a historical museum. Right. So it's probably open like Tuesdays and Saturdays from 4 to 7 or
but they do, because the whole area is haunted. I think I told you that.
Yeah. You told me about how like a lot of
it was a port.
Houses were actually moved. Mm-hmm. And so and the Lawler house was one of them, right? It was actually moved.
Exactly. And so that whole area is supposedly haunted. There's been a lot of unexplained phenomena happening in that area. So yeah, definitely need to go check it out. Maybe one of these days when you're in California, you can come and check it out.
Yeah, I'll probably be out in California this summer. So for a more extended period of time. So we can do some explorations of the unexplained. But I just just talking about that one, you're saying, when we were kids, there weren't like these, like the kind of investigations that you see now on like Ghost Adventures and things like that.
Yeah, they definitely kicked it off, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's we would have those shows like America's Most Haunted, and they would be specials that would happen a couple times a year. But, if I think we're close in age, and I think that cable was like kind of new when I was like it didn't exist until I was probably 10 years old or something like that. So just aging myself a little bit there. What? Cable didn't exist? I was like, what do you mean? No internet? I mean, I'm sure it existed. It's just like only the government used it or whatever.
Yeah, there was a point where the internet was not like what we know as it is today.
Right. Certainly weren't as dependent on it.
But it was definitely there, because you remember the movie War Games, right?
Right. Well, I was just thinking of, which is the one with Hal, the computer that's a like big giant computer that takes up the whole room.
Right.
And just totally lost the name of that movie.
That's 2000, right? The movie. That's not it. No. I'm thinking of Odyssey, Space
Jerry,
Odyssey.
I know you know this. You should chime in.
Jerry does.
Yeah. 2001: A Space Odyssey. Thank you very much. Yeah.
And I think he was only talking to Dave.
I don't know, Dave. Dave.
Dave.
What are you doing,
Dave?
What are you doing, Dave? Don't touch that button, Dave.
There he is, right there.
Yeah. I don't even remember what I was going to say. Oh, just that I think the whole sort of the investigation on demand is something that is kind of, you kind of get like mixed results with that, because I think that as anyone, like, people have asked me, so are we more likely to see a ghost on Halloween night than we would another night? And your odds would only be in your favor because the veil is thinner and reasons that we talked about. But as anyone can tell you that has done any kind of investigation, that, ghosts do not perform on command.
No.
They don't just come out when you say, hey, get out here, come throw a book at my head or whatever. It doesn't work like that. And most people who've had paranormal experiences are usually kind of almost thrown off by it or surprised by it to a certain extent. Certainly for me, somebody who is like always reading horror stories and always reading ghost stories and always interested in this kind of thing, when I've had paranormal experiences, it completely throws me off. It's like, first of all, I go through this whole thing of trying to rationalize what it actually was and how it couldn't possibly be paranormal, even though I'm totally a supernaturalist and totally believe in this kind of stuff. It's like this instinct kicks in. I think this is very common for people where you're like, okay, well, maybe it was the pipes, or maybe it was the wind, or maybe all these kinds of things that you say, oh, okay, maybe it was this or that. And I talk about that a lot with Banshees, because I think that Banshees are the thing that sound the most like the wind and can be dismissed as some kind of, is that a branch just scratching at your window and that type of thing, when in fact it's some sort of creature of the night that is lurking and staring in at you, but you don't happen to see it head on, and you'll never be able to catch it
Well, they come in as
in
a
that
flame,
moment.
right? Don't they? Or they come in as
Banshees. Banshees are usually seen in the form of either a beautiful woman or sometimes an old lady.
Okay.
I have read accounts of, and even had somebody, I was on his show and he talked to me about this like disembodied head.
Okay.
So there's been a few accounts of sort of a disembodied floating head, but typically, and some people only hear banshees, but what a banshee is it's basically somewhere between it. Banshee means of the fairy mound. And so it's more or less a fairy and a ghost, and most commonly equated with some kind of
a death
warning, right? Like a death omen. Yes, a portent of death.
Gotcha.
Yes. So to me, they're the most terrifying of all of the creatures out there because they don't indicate that you are going to die. They indicate that someone that you love is going to die, someone close to you or someone in your family. And that is a far more scary prospect than your own death, or at least for most of us. And certainly, in legend, the banshees are feared, but also unavoidable. And traditionally in Ireland, they were inherited by families. But then again, you had the original clans of Ireland who had, you had like the O'Briens and the O'Rourkes, and they would inherit this sort of banshee warning. Now, some people say that the banshees or the fairies or the ghosts would be attached to a person or a family or a house. But I think that what you inherit is the ability to see those things. So it can skip a generation. We know that with like psychic ability or the interest in paranormal phenomenon. That it often will like skip a generation. But in any case, a banshee you'll hear this sound. It will sound like a woman in mourning, essentially. It's this long, loud moan that can sound incredibly painful. And usually people rush to their window or rush out into the night because it sounds like somebody is distraught. And there are accounts of people seeing like a little lady walking down the road or the sidewalk, and you go up to her to, she seems like she's hobbling along, or you just say good day, and suddenly she transforms into this like hideous creature. Or it's this beautiful woman who's tapping at your window, and you open the window and it transforms into this like kind of wretched thing that has long snarling teeth and makes this sound that just chills you to your bone, and that you've heard the banshee scream. Typically they're not really malevolent, but there are accounts of malevolent banshees that will like rip through your house and break all your china and sort of snuff out your fire and just let you know. And it sounds very much like the beginning of a storm, or what we would think of as like this kind of crazy rushing wind that would just sort of destroy things, like a mini tornado.
That's what I was thinking in the beginning.
Yeah, but it's actually
rip through the house once in a while, and they'll do something like that.
That's what you can tell. No. That some people have toddlers, other people have banshees that destroy their homes. I'm just like, oh no, actually, I just don't clean. Meant to hire a housekeeper, but you just stop by unannounced. So
exactly, banshees usually take over.
I actually hired Mr. Bones to clean my this is my midnight magic room.
He's not doing a very good job right now,
and he is just totally kicking back. He obviously has had too much to drink, and it just went right through him. He cannot hold his liquor.
Right.
Literally, yeah.
Again, it just goes right through him, I think.
It just right through him, yeah.
That's what's happening.
He's a lightweight.
That's really... He is very lightweight. About 10 pounds, maybe. No, I was kidding.
Yeah.
But yeah, that I love how a lot of these stories are in the book. Again, it's good reference. It's great reference for people who do research and who just want to know, what do they do in case a banshee comes through their house, or they hear these noises, and read through the book. You'll find out this is what you need to know.
You'll find out what you need to know, but with banshees, there's really no remedy. I mean, you can draw up your get power of attorney That's about the only thing you can do at that point.
Power of attorney.
Power of attorney, because it's all gonna end soon. Yeah, I think that banshees are kind of one of the more frightening creatures. And when I did banshees, werewolves, and vampires, that was sort of the height of the re-vampire craze. So, vampire crazes, they come and they go. And this was actually during the Stephenie Meyer phase, the Twilight sort of.
No.
And I remember, not to totally call out my publisher, but he said, "Oh, you should. I think we should put. Why would you not put vampires first? Why would you put? Because the title of the book is Banshees, Werewolves, and Vampires, and that's the order they're in." And I said, "Trust me, no one's writing about banshees. No one's writing about banshees. There are lots of people writing about vampires, and there's a few writing about werewolls, but we'll be ahead of the curve." Well, banshees didn't really take off, but it still does set the book apart, I think.
Maybe you're going to set a trend. That's what's going to happen in about, the next couple of
10
months.
more years.
No. I think it's going to happen this year. This is the year of the banshee.
This is the year of the banshee, and
there you go.
There you go.
You're the banshee. But no, it's funny. Remember earlier I talked about one of the Mexican lore, El Cucuy. Yeah. And I don't know if you know that story or not, but
I don't. I want you to tell me that. I know of La Llorona, who is sort of the weeping woman, and she's similar to a banshee, right? Mm-hmm. Often seen walking along the roadside, sounds like a woman in mourning, and it's thought that she either killed her child or lost her child somehow, or her child was murdered, which is very similar to banshees. But she's usually all in white, whereas banshees are sometimes just sort of, just regular clothes or cloaked in black. But
and to go along with that, it's really the legends to scare your children, or you're the people who are not behaving. I should say the kids that don't behave, to kind of keep them away from going along the rivers and going along bodies of water.
Yeah, sure. That you see that with mermaid legends a lot too. Is that there are a lot of really scary mermaid stories, or bog lady or water nymph, and it was, it's evolved to sort of say, oh, they'll seduce you and drown you, but once upon a time it was just they were these really horrific beings that would reach out and pull you in. And I mean, essentially can be viewed as a metaphor for that sneaker wave we were talking about earlier, that riptide that just comes out and grabs you, and then wraps the kelp around your throat and pulls you down. I mean, that is a mermaid, just as it is anything in nature.
Very scary. Very scary.
Don't go in the ocean.
I don't like going in the ocean sometimes. It's scary.
It feels so good though.
It does. I do. I like walking along the beach just as well. So there you go. But El Cucuy, very interesting, is one of the Mexican folklores. I just brought it up real quick and Googled it. And according to Mexican folklore, El Cucuy is a small, hideous, hairy creature with glowing red eyes, has big ears like a bat, mouth full of razor-sharp teeth like a barracuda. The legend has been passed down over the years by word of mouth from mother to child, see, or parent to child.
Warning.
Parents often will warn their children, behave yourselves, or Cucuy will come and get you, take you away. So that's one of the things that the Cucuy does. When he comes, he hides in your closet or under your bed. He can take the shape of any dark shadow. He watches you silently and waits for his moment to pounce. Then he will take you away to his lair deep in the mountains and devour you.
Whoa.
So that's pretty good.
That's pretty scary.
Description of El Cucuy there.
And it's very boogeyman.
Very boogeyman. Yeah. But yeah, that's one of the things that I heard growing up when I was a child, and I've heard lots of parents tell my friends that too, and I would just look at them like, yeah, okay. But yeah, it's scary, and then to find out later on that there are so many other legends that are similar in different cultures.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I find interesting is we find the similarities in different cultures. Do you find that?
Absolutely. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. There's a boogeyman in every culture.
Mhm.
There's absolutely a boogeyman. And even the term boogeyman comes from something more like boggle or bogey, which is also equated with like hobgoblins and goblins. It's a similar word in Welsh, and it's the same idea. Not all of the creatures that fit in that category of like fairy or otherworldly creatures are considered like a boogeyman, but it's essentially the same idea that there is something out there lurking. And we know that some of that is, of course, a way to keep children close to the hearth, right? It's to keep them from wandering around. Now, the bog lady, like that makes perfect sense that, I mean, bogs look like, if you've ever walked on like a peat bog, it looks like regular ground. And then all of a sudden you're like, bloop, sinking down in, sort of like quicksand. Yeah. And so there's a lot of legends of like strange creatures that are out there in the bogs. And it's on the one hand, you have, okay, this makes sense that you would talk about this creature because it would warn children away from the coastline, warn children away from this body of water. But on the flip side, is that why, yes, you could you can like pick it apart and say, hey, it was probably just this warning thing. But I think that that's a mistake to say that it's simply a myth, as in it's a lie. Because, I think if there's one thing we know, it's that, stop dismissing what the indigenous people believe. Like, please just stop dismissing that as like myth or lie or fakery, because look where that has gotten us.
Right.
You're going to spend like thousands of dollars and, 200 years to prove that exactly what they said was happening all along is happening. So I think that we have this automatic, and I really thought a lot about this when I was writing the book about fairies and fairy tales and things, because I think we have this automatic sort of instinct to dismiss, even with ghost stories and people telling us their stories. There's that automatic like cynic that kicks in, and you think, okay, well, this person, they sound a little bit off, or yeah, well, I believe in vampires, but I do not believe in mermaids and things like that. Okay, so that's fine. You can have obviously you can't believe in everything all the time. Well, you can, and then you end up like me.
That's a great thing, though. I'm telling you.
Trapped in the box. But I do think that there is this tendency to sort of dismiss, and you saw this a lot with the way that Irish folklore was recorded.
Mm-hmm.
It was recorded with this sort of ethnocentric Church of England tinge that made it seem as if they were stories of the peasants and peasantry. And, you want to know what's really happening, ask the peasants. They're the ones who actually know what's going on.
Right.
So I think that there's this, what we have is the written record, and we see this with indigenous people in the United States, especially, that we have a written record, which was written, if we maybe 200 years ago, but was an oral tradition or written in a different language that was never actually recorded in the same way. So we have this this perception that these are all like these elaborate made up stories and these origin stories and things like that, and that we sort of dismiss these cultures as being something of the past instead of accepting that they are current, they are happening, they are still alive, still well, and right about these things. And so I think when you have any kind of story like a fairy tale or something that seems myth or mythological, that doesn't automatically qualify it as not being true. And in fact, when you start reading more into it, and again, you just have to sift through so much, and there were so many things that I learned writing that fairy book about the way that we recorded the stories that we've now sensationalized with like leprechauns and things like that. It's just like this completely outrageous, basically totally racist, stereotype of what a leprechaun is, based on some sort of like derogatory cartoon illustrations in a newspaper from like 1890, kind of looking down at Irish immigrants and kind of putting on the outfit that looked very typical of a
pretty
Irish
racist
immigrant at the time. Yeah. So I think that anytime I hear a story, especially if somebody's telling it to me, but even when somebody's telling it to me, it's different. It's a totally different experience. But when I'm reading something that, especially in like an old book, a lot of the books I read were published in like between 1890 and 1920. And that was you really have to sift through a lot of crap to get to what the real story is there. So I don't know why I just went off on that obviously that it bothers me because
it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah. I don't like being I don't like missing the sort of, the idea that these things could be real based on the fact that they haven't gotten like their, perfect photograph of it.
And that's the thing is there could be logical explanations for a lot of things, but some things can just stay unexplained and be mysterious. But
we got to have something to look for.
Well, we do.
Right.
And I think by reading your books, people can get a better idea of what also could be happening out there besides a mountain lion or a serial killer or something like that.
I mean, it could be a mountain lion or a serial killer. We're not saying,
but what I'm saying, but this is what we're trying to say is people don't discount that there are things that are unexplained. And this is, you read some of the, the books like Varla and do your research, you'll find that there's a lot of similarities to these types of legends and mythology. And it will definitely, I think it would stand, that some of these things do happen. We have just a few minutes left. Actually, it looks like we're almost out of time, but
later.
No, at the beginning of the show, I mentioned that, I don't know if I mentioned it. I know we were talking about it, but some of my favorite monsters during Halloween time, and just any time. But this year, I've been obsessing on werewolves, and I'd like to know what is your favorite topic or creature or myth that you like, Warla?
Oh, my absolute favorite monster of all time is actually Frankenstein, or Frankenstein's monster, I should say. The Creature was his real name in the book. So Mary Shelley's Frankenstein. But I like all the variations. I love the Boris Karloff version that we know as Frankenstein or Frankenstein's monster. Mm-hmm. And along those lines, you had, that was like the era of Lon Chaney as the werewolf and all those kind of like great Bela Lugosi as Dracula. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So those are, but yep. I mean, Frankenstein's really, really high up there for me. And that's kind of an interesting one too, because you have Frankenstein's monster, you have Mary Shelley's sort of wrestling with the afterlife and death and the loss of, she lost a child, and what would you do? Like who among us would not go to this level? Mm-hmm. But you also have the fact that this wonderful night where they were all telling ghost stories, trying to scare each other. It's basically like a long freak weekend for writers, and they were hanging out trying to scare each other. And she had kind of the spark of this idea, and then she had a dream. And in this dream, they had sort of resurrected this creature, and she had this real foreboding with it, knowing that it was something really evil, but at the same time, couldn't shake it. And so she ended up writing basically the bones of what became her novel that within that weekend. And, that whole idea of her being kind of like playing God And who wouldn't, what would you do to spend one more day with somebody that you lost? Like,
Of
would
course.
you plug them in and reanimate them, or would you just try and see if you could do it? All that kind of stuff. But
this is during a period where the church is still relevant, and I'm not saying they're not relevant now, but they were more prominent back in those days.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
so for this to come out would probably be an abomination, if you will.
Yes, and there was also so much happening in medical science at the time, and you actually did have a lot of people who were grave robbing and things of that nature to learn more about what we actually know today in modern medicine. I mean, quite frankly, it's based on a very ghoulish past. And as somebody who has benefited from modern medicine on more than one occasion, I'm not critiquing that necessarily, but yeah, we, stole bodies and paid people to take them down the alleyway under cover of night because medical scientists and doctors and students were basically underground trying to learn about the human body, in kind of in contrast with what the church wanted everybody to accept as the doctrine. And they're cutting open cadavers and doing these sketches and things like that. So it was a really, and actually this is also sort of the beginning of so much progress in terms of what we know about electricity and communication and transportation and all that kind of stuff. All those things sort of fed the modern ghost story and the idea that, you can imagine the invention of the telephone, what that would actually do to somebody who had spent their whole life writing letters. So you pick up this phone and there's this disembodied voice and they're saying that there's somebody that you know, but how are you going to believe it? And so there was so much progress about that kind of period of time and what was happening in terms of science and scientific discovery, and yet what we didn't know about the supernatural and the unknown, and those two things kind of clash together. So
very fascinating. I agree with a lot of that. And our silent producer kind of piped up in okay, never mind. So
he's saying nope. Okay. Well, I can okay, so he had a little comment here. Everything we know about electricity is wrong. And I can only comment on that. Again, during this period of time when Edison was, bringing light to every room, I actually have a book. It's called I love the title of this book. It's The Diary and Sundry Observations of Thomas Alva Edison. And in it, there's a small section in which it talks about his sort of psychic or his experiments with trying to connect with the spirit world. And that's something I know we talked about it last time.
He had a ghost machine, didn't he, or something like
that? Yes. And we, during that time, I mean, that was just this time when, it was post Civil War. So you had a nation in mourning. You had people who were grieving and trying so desperately to contact people that had died, their sons and their husbands and the fathers of their children. And at the same time, you had these advances in technology. Things were starting to really go forward into the industrial age. Plus, you had electricity and to the telegraph and the invention of the telephone and eventually the radio and all of these things that were bringing this kind of other element into households that didn't exist prior to that, and which kind of made people question whether or not, who's to say that you couldn't contact a spirit if you can switch this thing on the wall and it turns a light on. I mean, that was this, we don't recognize that today quite as being so shocking, but I mean, at the time, you were filling the thing full of kerosene or going and stoking the fire to try and keep the darkness at bay, and to be able to flip a switch. I mean, that was really, obviously we know that was revolutionary, but I think also in terms of sort of the metaphysical side of it and the spiritualist movement that was taking place coincided with that very much, and all of the kind of, you know, Ouija experiments and things like that.
Right, we didn't even touch on that. And you know, to go along with that, I've heard of stories, modern day, of course, where there have been phone calls from the other side that people have gotten of their you know, their loved ones that have passed away.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's
Or
through
like
the
the phone
telephone.
rings, right? And you
Mhm.
go to answer it and it turns out to be the exact time that this person passed away.
Yep, exactly. You know, so
Yeah.
very cool. Man, I'd love to talk some more, but I want you to come
I
back.
know. We could talk forever, huh? I
Awesome.
know. So
So
fun.
yes, this was great. I had a great time. This was a spooktacular night.
Super
And
spectacular.
super spectacular. And once again, congratulations to
Oh,
Cassandra.
yeah,
Um,
congratulations. I actually already saw something pop up that I could see
very
that
good.
she had emailed me, so that's wonderful.
Excellent.
I'll be sending that out. I'm excited.
Well, thank you. And everyone in chat, thank you for joining us tonight. This has been a great evening. I'm so happy that everyone can join us, and everyone have a happy Halloween.
Yeah.
You know, a great Dia de los Muertos, and I'm missing another Celtic.
Samhain. Happy Witches Night.
Thanks again, Jerry Cthulhu, for producing the show tonight. We appreciate it very much. And I guess with that, we'll say, everyone, stay strange and have a great evening. Thank you very much for joining us.